Alrighty. So one other way that you can actually bake normal maps out, which is actually can be a little easier if you're just working with one object and it's got its own multi-resolution. I showed you kind of the other way for the first ones. That's important to know because there are times when you might have several different models, like maybe you have rivets or small little pieces that you don't actually want to make objects for your model, but you want them to be kind of in the normal map itself. That's where you have to have several different objects and kind of go about the normal mapping the way we did it previously, right? But there's another way to actually get an even faster, cleaner bake out inside of Blender, right? But it only works when you have just one object and it's got its multi-resolution. So basically what we're doing for our crab, this will work well for. Other kinds of modeling situations where maybe you have like a bunch of small little models in the high res and you want to bake them to a much simpler low res object, you really need to use the other method where you have multiple objects and you're baking between two separate objects. But in this case, if you've just got one object with one multi-res and you basically just want to take the sculpting from this and bake it down to a normal map, there is an even faster and easier way to do that. Now, most of the steps are still the same, right? We would still have to go in here and create a new map, right? So we'd create new. You could always do it from here, of course. But also, you're going to want to plug these in here anyway. So we go add, right? Texture, image texture. Drop that in here. Click on new. In this case, just make it a 2048 by 2048. There we go. And 32-bit floating point is always good for normal maps. Just keeps it a cleaner map. It's got more information, so it could bake it nicer. It is going to be a bigger file size, though. So let's call that brief title. Let's say normal. All right, hit OK. So this process is always still the same for this, right? You always have to kind of create a texture node with an image texture in it. So we've got that, right? And we'll make sure it's kind of selected. It's the active one, right? So you create the new one there, and then you kind of, boom, pick it from here. And you make sure the node's selected, right? So you make sure that node's selected. The biggest difference here, though, is that, and it's all still the same in this respect. So most of this is still the same. There's just a slightly different setting and things you have to do. So in this case, one of the things to get it to work the best is you go to your modifier, right? Your multi-resolution modifier. And what you do is you turn down your kind of stuff to the lowest level, right? So you want to make sure to turn these down to their lowest levels. And this way it'll actually bake properly. I found that if you have it at the highest settings, it'll bake some of the detail, but some of it will be lost. And you'll think, oh, it's not working. But what it needs is a comparison between the lowest res and the highest res. So in this case, if you just turn your multi-resolution modifier down really low, it'll do a great job of capturing all of the contrasted detail from this low res version to the higher subdivision level of it. So in this case, we just make sure to turn these down. We go back up to the kind of little microwave suitcase thing, switch to cycles, so this is all still the same, and it's still the bake one, right? So we still go to the bake. It's just that instead of going through here and switching bake types, you just do bake for multi-resolution. And you'll notice it automatically goes to normals, and really you can only use this for normals and displacement maps. So if you wanted to bake like ambient occlusion and other types, you really would have to use the separate objects method. It's one of the reasons we kind of showed that off. I really want to make sure you guys saw that. That's actually pretty common in a lot of applications that you'll have to do it like that way. But many packages can just do it directly from the multi-resolution. In this case, there is a bake for multi-resolution checkbox. You just, like I said, you just want to make sure to turn your multi-resolution subdivision levels down low. And then we can hit bake. And there we go. And give it its time. Bake all out. What's going on there? Should have baked that. Bake for multi-resolution. What's going on there? It has to be level 1. Let's double check though. There we go. My bad. I was going to say, it baked so quick that, and I forgot to turn on the viewer here, but you'll see right here that it's right there, right? We actually fully have that baked map there, right? So just make sure to kind of, pick your normal here as well so you can actually see it bake out. But you see how it did a great job of baking all that detail without any of the anomalies, without quite as much setup. And then, of course, as usual, I was going to say that was weird. I'm just like, I forgot to view it. It baked fine. Like I said, I actually usually use this text add-on, which is really cool. I'm going to show it to you guys on the next project, which actually makes the baking process even easier. It kind of uses this multi-resolution feature, but it's kind of all set up within kind of this UV area, and there's a couple of other cool features for UV wrapping that add-on gives us. So later on, I'll actually show you an add-on that makes it even easier to bake lots of different map types. So of course, we take this color and we plug it into normal. So remember, you just left-click drag on there. Now, like I said, I like to always have the actual normal map node in between here too, so I can control the strength. So I'll just go to Add, right, and we'll go to Vector, because that's where things like your bump nodes are at and your normal map. So if you want to have intervening nodes that give you control over strength, that's where you can go. So we'll go to normal map. Now remember, what's really cool about Blender is you see how it always gives you the node and you can move it around, but you'll notice that it highlights that line white when I put it over it, and that automatically plugs it in, which is really cool. And then we can turn up the strength, like maybe to 3. And you notice how this map came out great, and it baked perfect, and it captured all the detail with no anomalies. So this is actually that great little process you can do. Make sure to maybe tell it to use the crab body UVs. If you really, really want to make sure, particularly when you get multiple textures in there, it's always not a bad idea to kind of go to Add, Input UV Map, drop this in, then you can kind of plug that into Vector, and then crab body, and then you've got a really, really solid set of UVs all pointing everywhere. But you'll notice that actually bakes out pretty quickly. So just remember to pick the normal view here so you can actually see the map bake and know, oh, it's done, right? Instead of waiting around for like a minute going, why did it not show up? Like I said, I usually use this add-on, and it actually has a preview feature right in there, and it just, boom, I don't have to go to the shading to see all this stuff better, although technically from Sculpt UV Editing you can see it because it's really just this. But I just wanted to show you that there is a bake for multi-resolution, and that actually does a really awesome bake. The thing, though, is that probably the biggest thing to remember is you need to go to your multi-resolution and have these turned down low to 0 or 1 so that you really get this detail, right? So just remember to kind of go down to your lowest levels on that multi-resolution. At this point, I can get rid of it if I want to. Remember, though, you can always go to things like Apply Base, right? So it applies any shaping you did to it. We could delete. And you see all the details there without any of the other stuff. So it does bake your normal maps out quite nicely and quite well. It doesn't have any of those artifacts that you expect it to have, which is great. So keep that in mind as you bake. Yeah, it's a pretty neat little function. It's up to you which way you want to go with it, which kind of maps you want to bake out. Kind of up to you. No real right or wrong there. I just figured you might want to see that there is a cool multi-resolution option that will do a pretty good job of baking your normal maps for you. Yeah, so I just wanted to kind of make sure that you know that there is that feature for baking normal maps down. And it's a little easier. But like I said, you have to make sure to turn your multi-resolution subdivisions down for it to capture this detail well. If you don't, it'll end up like this kind of detail. It'll get pretty well, but like this kind of detail, it just won't get that well, right? So make sure to, in your multi-resolution modifier, turn those levels down to really low or lowest. And then when you go back up to cycles bake, you can just check bake for multi-resolution on and bake, and boom, it does it without some of the extra steps. So I just want to make sure to get you guys to see a couple things, and all this other stuff is still the same, right? But it's just a great way to kind of get you guys to see one more little video on normal map baking and all that stuff.